Hey, what is up, guys? This is your boy Max, and today I'm going to be reviewing a Netflix original show, and it's called the Standups. And the Standups is basically a stand up comedian series where every episode they have a different comedian doing stand up. And the first season that just released, there's about 6 episodes, and each episode is a different comedian. First episode is Nate Bargatze, second episode is Fortune Feimster, third episode is Deon Cole. Fourth episode is Nikki, Glaser. Fifth episode is Beth Stilling, and then the final and last episode is Dan Soder. Out of all these comedians, the most famous one is probably Dan Soder, and the second would probably be Deon Cole. And I'm just going to give you my opinion on the season so far. And in my opinion, I just didn't find the series that entertaining. The only episode that I found entertaining was the last episode with Dan Soder. And one of the main reasons was because a lot of these comedians, in fact, every single comedian other than Dan Soder, their just delivery of the jokes was just off to me. And the tonality of the voice that they used was just a little exaggerated, or it felt like they weren't giving enough effort. Like, for example, the first episode with Nate Bargatze, it felt like he was delivering the jokes with a bad timeline. So what I mean by this is he wouldn't deliver the punchline in a correct fashion, in my opinion, to make you laugh. And on top of that, he would just go from joke to joke like really quickly, where you wouldn't have time to, think about the joke even for like a slight second, and then he'd just keep bouncing from joke to joke to joke to joke. And this is pretty much what it was like with every single comedian other than Dan Soder. And one of the things that I found weird about the first episode with Nate was it just sort of felt like anything that he would say, the audience would just laugh no matter what. So to me, it felt kind of staged. I might be wrong and it's probably not staged, but I feel like no matter how stupid whatever he said was, people would just laugh no matter what. So he could say something as stupid as, "Oh, and then I went to the kitchen and I got a glass of water," and then the audience would just burst into laughter out of nowhere. Or he could be like, "Oh, so I was in the park the other day and I was walking my dog," and then the audience would just, burst into laughter like, "Ha ha ha ha, this is so funny." So, that kind of just like, made me feel a little bit suspicious. The second episode with Fortune Feimster, I felt like she was being a little bit too overexpressive. And it basically just means that when it came to her telling the jokes, I felt a sort of Amy Schumer vibe coming. Like it's sort of like a little bit too loud and a little bit too over exaggerated. And she used the whole loudness thing to come off as funny, even though everybody just can agree that saying jokes like really loudly is not going to make it any funnier than if you were to say it in a normal tone of voice. And on top of that, it just had so many references to her being a lesbian. I'm like, you're a lesbian? That's cool. That's awesome. Good for you. But she always just kept making lesbian jokes. Like, I'm a lesbian. Woo, yeah. I was okay with it for like 2 minutes, but then it kept going and kept going. And like, oh, yeah. And she kept relating everything to lesbianism. So I just got tired of watching like about 8 minutes through, and I stopped watching. Then I moved on to the next episode with Deon Cole, and his episode to me was he sort of had this like dry humor way of telling jokes where he's just like speaking in a very monotone voice, and he's just like, yeah, so I went to the club the other day and I was the only black guy. And the funny thing is, I was expecting him, I know it might be a little bit presumptuous, but I was expecting him to make a lot of black jokes, and lo and behold, he did make a lot of black jokes or a lot of references to being black. And to me, that's just a little bit overplayed. Like where you have ethnic minorities who are comedians just always make references to their ethnicity or how they're the only black person in a room, or they relate everything to blackness. I'm black, I'm Indian, whatever. I mean, if you do that kind of stuff, maybe try to limit it to like a certain amount, but I felt like a lot of his jokes were related to him being black, and I just got super tired of it. And I just moved on to like the next episode with Nikki Glaser. And the episode with Nikki Glaser, she spoke in a very like sorority girl type of voice, and just like, trying way too hard to be funny, and I found that kind of off-putting, and I really didn't find any of her jokes to be funny. And the weird part of it is, like, she always made references to her body parts. Like, she's like, oh, my private part this, my private part that. I'm not going to say the word because I don't want this video to get demonetized because I say the word of the private part, but, does what a lot of female comedians do, like, referencing her private parts and her bodily functions, and I just didn't find that funny at all. Fifth episode with Beth Stilling, same exact thing. Very monotone voice, but instead of, having the whole sorority girl high pitched voice like California girl like Nikki Glaser, hers was just, straight up monotone, kind of like Deon Cole, but with a hint of condescension, in her tone. And she also made very, very high amounts of references to her body, and that just got tiring like very quickly. And finally, the last and final episode is Dan Soder, and by far I find his episode to be the funniest because not only did he have a natural way of talking, he delivered the punchlines well. He made jokes that were relatable, that were not overplayed, and overall, it was just like a pleasure to watch. I mean, the jokes he made were something that everybody can relate to, and he didn't over exaggerate everything. Like, he didn't speak in a monotone voice. He wasn't super excited the whole time, or he wasn't like straight up socially awkward like Nate Bargatze, who I felt like he was a little bit nervous on stage, which I get. Some people get nervous on stage, but being a comedian, a stand-up comedian at that, I feel like Nate Bargatze should have, gotten rid of his social awkwardness by now. Like, he should have gotten used to being on stage. But that's pretty much my review on, the new original series, the stand-ups on Netflix. If you're into stand-up comedy, feel free to check it out. You might like it. I mean, it wasn't really up to my comedy senses and style, but you guys might enjoy it. I'm more into, the more popular comedians, like your Louis C.K.'s, your Joe Rogan's, your George Carlin, Aziz Ansari, those types of comedians. And I feel like amateur comedians just don't cut it out for me. And I feel like that's what this stand-up special was. It was amateur comedians. I don't know if Dan Soder's still, quote, an amateur comedian, but a lot of these guys I haven't heard of. I mean, I've seen Deon Cole maybe in a few shows or something, but I've never considered him a funny guy, And that's pretty much it. That's my review on this. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And until next time, Max out.